Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they moved through their pain, they realized that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Fara Gibson, everybody. Fara Gibson is a psychic medium, right? That's what you like to go by? Is that it?
I am, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, evidential medium, psychic medium. I don't really give psychic future predictions. I just make it my focus to connect with your loved ones who have passed, but yeah.
All right, very cool. Farah and I got acquainted through helping parents heal, and Farah lives down in Arizona, so I got to meet her in person when I went down there for the conference in August, but we're going to get a whole lot of information from Farah. She's got a new book out. We're going to get to that. She's got other books as well, so we'll get all the information of that to you too. But Farah, what I wanted to ask you first was, when did you discover that you had this psychic ability, or what happened? Like, was it something when you were younger, or what happened when you realized that you had these abilities? How did that transpire?
No, absolutely. So it's definitely something I was born with. I don't remember a time that I didn't have these abilities. So I would say that I was born with it. I didn't always understand it when I was little, and when I was a kid, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody teaching me. It was pretty taboo in my family. Kind of still is as far as my parents go. So, I didn't have anybody embracing what I had and helping me to develop it. And honestly, I really didn't share it with anybody. People ask me sometimes, like, were you scared of it? And I didn't really have anything to be scared of because it was just part of me, So, but when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I really started trying to delve into what it was that I had, because I recognized that I was different from other people. I would hear things that nobody else heard and see things that nobody else saw, like in my mind's eye, like a memory, and, get indications on my body. I mean, I went through all kinds of trials and tribulations trying to figure myself out as far as, getting body indications and thinking, oh, maybe I'm having a stroke, or maybe I'm having a heart attack. And I wasn't a sissy lala. So it was like, I felt like I needed to go to the ER sometimes. And then I realized I was getting passing indications for people who had passed on my body. And I was getting, memories and really messages from people that I needed to start sharing. And then I started to see Sylvia Browne and John Edwards on TV. John Edwards had a style that was very similar to what I was seeing. And so I was very intrigued by that. And it was, later on in my teens and my early 20s that I started sharing messages. But those were private messages that were life-saving in those moments. Maybe somebody was on the verge of suicide and I was reaching out and saying something to them from a parent who had passed. So those were not messages that they were sharing either to anybody else, So I still wasn't telling anybody that I was a medium. I actually never told my ex that I was a medium. He was extremely abusive. And so grandma always said I needed to be loved as much as I am by my new husband, to really kind of share the beauty within myself. And when I started sharing it unnecessarily, I say, where it wasn't those life-saving moments for somebody in a suicidal moment, I realized how important this was when I started to share it on a bigger level, and word of mouth just spread like wildfire because of the accuracy that I had. You really have to prove yourself with this over and over again, I think. That's just part of the journey. I get it. It's a skeptical thing for people, and you're dealing with grief. Grief is such a sensitive subject. So yeah, it started, at birth, and I've been doing readings for the public now for probably about 13, 14 years. So
yeah, I'm picturing like when you're kids, right? Like say teenagers or whatever, and you're hanging out and this happens and your talk is two friends. And a lot of times you share things. I'm thinking back when I was younger and you're sharing with a friend and you never really think of each other as weird in what's happening. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like, wow, I had this feeling or I had this thing, and was that kind of like what it was like? Just kind of chummy like that and you shared it with each other and then
I totally think that I hung out with some weird kids too. You know what I mean? So they were a little weird like me. And I think that we delved into everything. I loved Jim Morrison with the Doors. I was like, let's see if I could figure out what he was saying, and things like that. And I think I tried a lot of different things. Somebody gave me a deck of tarot cards once and I was like, oh, let me try this. And I was like, I don't have the brain capacity to memorize that book. It just wasn't my thing. And, people are like, ooh, crystals. And I was like, okay, crystals, and I had tons of crystals. In fact, I still had saved them for years, but they never did anything for me, and I tried little things here and there, to try to find my footing and figure out where I fit. And then I realized that I didn't necessarily fit in a box because I didn't need tools. My abilities were built in. And that's, so searching for these tools that were going to help me really didn't help. They just gave me something to rule out more than anything, I think, So yeah, I talked to friends about it, but definitely like I said, not my family.
The hardest one sometimes, right?
Yeah. Dad's a good old boy and he's a hunter and a fisherman and it just wasn't his thing and that's okay. And I love my dad very much, it's just not his thing and that's okay. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So the first time I heard about you was through Helping Fathers Heal, which is an offshoot of Helping Parents Heal. We talk about it all the time on here. I'm a very big proponent. You know that. So, all the guys were saying, they're like, oh, Farah's amazing. Farah's amazing. And I didn't know you at all. And then you came on to one of our calls and I'm going to tell everybody what happened on that call. I was just walking around in our garage and I had you on the phone, but I wasn't even on video. I'm just listening because I'm out there with Judy and we're hanging out and when we're just in the garage. Now, Judy is, she will entertain these things, but she's not into it like I am. And so she's listening. I had the phone on speaker. So I sent a message because you were bringing some kids through. And what that means for those who don't know is that Farah will get one of the children will come through and speak to Farah for one of the guys there. And so that was happening.
Was not in the plan that day because I was not going to do readings on that call. Keep going.
Lucked out. The kids had another plan. That's what happened there. So that's happening. It happened maybe once or twice, and then you're taking questions in the chat. And so, and with what I do with, the podcast and things that I'm doing to try to help people otherwise, I always try to think from the griever side. And so I'm always trying to get those questions that they may be asking or they may be feeling. And so I just asked a general question. It wasn't in regards to me at all. I just was asking a question for my own information so that I could relay that to others to try to help them. And the question was, what do you say to guys when their kids aren't coming through? They may be jealous or feel, sad about that or something. And that was the question that I asked. And then what Farah did was she said, you asked if I could come on or something. And so I put the video on and I came on the call, with audio and everything. And you said, have I ever done a reading for you? And I said, no, you haven't. And I had never met you or anything. And then you started talking about, first of all, that we had a water problem in our basement. And so that was true. It was true. And what happened is we had seepage through our wall. And so there was just water coming into the basement that way. There's moisture coming in. And so what Judy had done is she had put some Flex Seal on there to fix it. And what you said was that you just did kind of a makeshift way of fixing that. That's what you said about that. And so I'm like, interesting, but then you said something about if you're facing your house on the left side, you said you have a drainage issue or something like that, or something maybe to do with even with the eaves troughs. And so Jeff, my son who passed, and Jeff was 27 and he was a fix-it guy. He was a work around the house guy. He worked for a construction company and all these things. So Judy and Jeff had talked about cleaning our eaves troughs at one time because on the left side of our house, our eaves troughs were so gunked up that, when the the helicopters fall into the eaves troughs and then they start growing. That's what our eaves trough looked like when you said that to us. We had a drainage problem on the left side of our house. And you know this because I brought the picture to you in Arizona to show you. The next day I went out and took a picture of that because I was like, people got to know this. It's like, so you had something about that, bringing Jeff through that way and everything. And I'm looking at Judy and I'm saying, are you listening to this? Did you hear this? So those people out there who think that, I'm sure there are those who do readings and that kind of stuff that are not maybe as, let's say, I don't know, they might be cheating you or something like that. So, but where would you ever get the idea? You didn't even know I lived in a house, for one thing. And where would you just come out of nowhere and say, something so obscure? I mean, that stuff just doesn't happen.
Your son, it's his way of saying, I love you, I'm with you, I see you, Dad. And that's what's important to me. So when I connect with them, I challenge them. Give me crap Farah wouldn't know. Like that's my baseline with them. You've got to give me something that's going to catch their attention to let them know that you're seeing them, that you're loving them, that you're present, that you're with them. So you're telling me that he was, into those fix-it type things and that she had done the partial fix. So he's also sending love to her by bringing that validation up as well, at the same time. So he's including the both of you in that validation of like, hey, I see you and you still haven't taken care of that, So
that is
like, it doesn't mean you have to take care of it. It's just his way of saying, I see you in the present. It's just a fact. So, yeah.
That is beautiful because so many people are wondering, why don't I get the burning bush experience? Why don't they just appear in front of me, and this type of thing? And I've heard it from you and others that is it. They're qualifying themselves by showing these things that are applicable only to you or your situation. And so it's personal. It's very personal. And people need to kind of understand that it's not always going to be this big. I wish I'd get a big hug from Jeff too, but it's not happening that way, but it happens in plenty of others.
Answer that in the respect. So the truth is you're growing through your grief, and your grief growth is part of your journey. It's meant to be. So they're not meant to be in your face every day, making your grief easy. Gosh, we would love this whole world to be like heaven, but the truth is you came here for the hard. So know that they're still present even on the days that you don't feel them, or if they're getting to somebody else and that somebody else is telling you about, like, I had this sign from your so-and-so, or I had this dream with your so-and-so. If they're telling you about it, that is still your loved one's way of getting to you. And there's blessings in that as well. Sometimes we feel jealous of like, oh my gosh, they got the dream and I didn't. But the truth is, if they told you about it, that's their way of getting to you with love in the best way they can, while your grief blocks are kind of up, and making it a little hard for you to see it or to sense it. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you about my Judy's sister-in-law, and she it was the summer. So Jeff passed in February. It was that summer. We're at her daughter's graduation party at their house. And her name is Jen. And so Jen had never talked about this type of stuff ever. And she comes up to me at the party, and it's a little later in the party. We had a few drinks, we were having a good time. And she goes,
that's a party.
That's part of a party. So she goes, she's like, she's squirming a little bit. And she's like, I don't know how to say this to you. And something just came upon me that I knew where she was going and where she was coming from. And I just said, Jen, it's all right. I believe. And she looked at me and she knew that I knew. And she was totally comforted. It was like something just came over her, like she just let a sigh out. And she goes, I don't talk about this. I don't tell people about this, but I do have these visions at times and things. And she goes, I had a vision of Jeff. Now, for those who don't know, Jeff passed from fentanyl. He passed in his bed, and I found him in the morning. And so what she saw was Jeff over himself, like looking, like trying to get back or upset, that he was there. And then she said, I saw your mom come up behind him and pull him by the shoulder and take him back. And I was like, oh my God, my mom passed a couple of years before Jeff, and then I just heard recently too, someone talking about spirits that leave the body suddenly, that sometimes it takes a little acclimation time and they're like, oh shit, like what's going on? Right. Is that your experience of those type of things too, or what?
So I would say if she was getting that vision, she was probably seeing the millisecond that he passed in her vision, because he probably would have had an opportunity at that moment to jump back in body. So that hovering point, that NDE experience, like where we're almost there, but just not quite. She's probably seeing that where his soul is like, oh my gosh, I'm out of body. Do I want to go back into it? And then the comfort of your mom, and then him instantly getting that knowing of, what, my soul has reached its growth that I intended. So I'm going with grandma. And so that's the point of him crossing over. I would say that she was seeing him. I don't feel like there's any delay in their passing from the time that they leave their body. Like when they actually truly pass, they're instantly in pure perfection in heaven, from in the millisecond that their soul knows that it has reached its growth. And so he was probably in that passing point when she's seeing him, kind of pulling out a body, and then grandma coming and getting him. I mean, that's a beautiful scene to see. But I always say, like, people reach out to me a lot and they say, well, my loved one only passed like a month ago, and so told me that I have to wait 6 months before I can connect with them. That's bullshit, because I can tell you that I can connect with them the same millisecond that they passed. I've actually done readings for people that were still on life support. Mm-hmm. That have validated themselves in beautiful ways, because your soul communication is present at all times. Like you and I, like, we have this body and our soul is the driver, of this car that I call our body like the car, and our soul is the driver. And even when you go to bed at night and I go to bed at night, our soul does not need to sleep. So we jump out of our body all the time. Somebody called it astral travel. I don't do the oogie boogie words, but that's the only one I got for that. And, that's when we have the ability to have those in-spirit visits and all of those things. But that falling feeling that you get sometimes that scares the crap out of you and jolts you awake, that's your spirit going, oh shit, guys, got to go. My body's about to wake up. And it's that re-entry back into self. And it scares the crap out of you every time. It'll just make you like, or maybe like you wake up, can't move, can't scream. People are like, oh my God, there was demons holding me down. I'm like, no, your fucking driver was not back in the car, and the car can't go without the driver. So, and then your driver gets back in the car, and then you have control again. So, what I'm explaining that for is your son would have been in that, your soul is always kind of leaving body, but in that moment, he just didn't come back in, if that makes sense, because his soul then realized like, whoa, I'm out and I'm actually not going back in, and I'm going to go with grandma, because I'm so beautiful. Your son is so much more beautiful than you and I that he graduated first. And that's the truth.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. I was just talking about this, and this is advanced, folks. So if you're not quite at this point, I'm very sensitive to those who are early in grief, and they may be listening to this. And I always tell you, take care of yourself right now. That's all you need to do. Just take care of yourself. Some of these things are really advanced. But I heard some of these things early on too, and I didn't really gravitate toward them at the time. So just put them away in your filing cabinet. But, so the idea of soul groups and this type of thing, where we live in this collective consciousness, really, that is our home. And we have soul groups. Do you believe in soul groups, that we have those?
I don't know what a soul group is.
So in Journey of the Souls, Michael Newton and Destiny of Souls, he does hypnotherapy and takes people in between lives. And so they say that they have a cluster of people or of souls that they're with all the time in those in-between lives. And that you look at your life plan coming up, and you decide how your soul needs growth. and you agree with some of your soul group people that they're going to play these roles maybe, or something of the sort. And so
I just call them family, friends, and coworkers. But yes, no, I get you. Yeah, like so we have this. I call it this circle. I say that we sit in this circle with our loved ones in heaven with soul planning. So yeah, we're saying the same thing. We're just calling it a little bit different. And you have people in different dynamics that are going to live different roles in your life that are going to challenge you. And you have a few people that sign up to be villains in your circle as well, right? So in that sense, you could probably think of the people in your life that are the gift that keep on giving and they never get any better. Well, they're playing their role well. You'll high five them even someday and say, wow, thanks for the growth. Thanks for the lessons. But everybody plays a very important role in your dynamic of your life. Everybody.
Yeah. And I just tell people, I have these conversations in my car all the time while I'm driving. I have a placard about the podcast on there. And I say that my son, Jeff, passed. And then I say I'm okay to talk about it. And it brings up a lot of conversations. So just had one today. I took a gentleman to the airport. In fact, he was from, North Carolina. I thought he was from Arizona, but he wasn't. But so I took him anyways. And we talked about this the whole way. And he was like totally on board. But anyways, with the soul group idea. So, and again, this is advanced for people. I understand this. And some people would say, how can you think that about your son passing or whatever? But I just firmly believe this stuff now. So I don't even apologize for it really at all. But I believe that Jeff played that role for me. And that my enlightenment was the purpose in that. And so my soul needed the growth. He's probably higher than I am. So he played that role for me so that I could be enlightened in this earth to raise my soul level. Do you agree with something like that?
No, that's exactly. So this book that I just wrote really explains all of that in depth. And I feel so the book that I wrote, I feel like somebody that's even on day one, if their child passed and they read this book, it's going to put so much perspective to that explanation, just to give an explanation of why. Because people are like, wait, why if heaven is so perfect, why do we leave there for growth? What do we need to grow for? And, the truth is we have the ability to grow our light level to be, now I want to say the G word because I do believe in God, but the God that I know is super cool and laid back compared to how some people make him out to be. I don't think he's all judgy and terrible like everybody. Right. People don't. But, it's because we are all made of beautiful, amazing light. And I do believe we're all made of God's light. And he makes us each in different levels of his light. Angels are some of the highest levels of light. There's so many different levels of light in heaven. But we have the ability to grow our light level to be closer to God's likeness or to be closer to that angelic level. And so we come here to earth to live the hard, and there's beautiful in the terrible that we live through because there's growth in it. And so I would say that every one of us are spiritual badasses because not every soul in heaven chooses to live a life. You're here for an amazing purpose. And there's so much amazing dynamic in how we support one another in our growth plan for what we want for ourselves. And that dynamic that you're talking about with this whole group, or, you find your people and then you spend your life with them, growing one another and also sharing love with one another and frustrations and everything else, because that's earthly. So yeah.
And how that can hurt other people, but think of the superstar your kid is, in that role. It's just like, oh man, they're at such a higher plane, and they're even better than we thought of on this earth. And that's amazing.
Well, and in heaven, it's so much lighter, right? So as you're sitting in the soul circle with your with your son, if you're sitting in that dynamic and he's like, okay, you're writing a life and you're like, okay, you're going to be my son. And he's like, okay, you're going to be my dad. But he's like, but I got one for you. Now, here's the thing. He's got his blueprint in his hand for his soul plan and you have yours. He's not bigger than your soul plan and you're not bigger than his. He will write you into moments of it and you will write him into moments of yours, but you cannot change his soul plan and he cannot change yours. So when he says, I've got one for you, and you're like, what do you got? And he's like, I'm going to graduate first. I'm going to graduate. And I don't call it death or dying. I say they graduate to heaven because they get out of this hellhole before us. And so, he's like, I'm going to graduate first. And you're like, ooh, good one, because heaven is so much lighter than it is here. And there's probably a soul walking behind you in heaven going, that one's a bitch. Don't do that whole losing a child thing. I've done that. It's terrible, and you're like, shut up. I can handle this, because it's so much lighter in heaven. You have no idea what terrible is in heaven because there's not a negative emotion that exists in heaven. So understanding terrible or understanding hard is not a thing that we do when we're writing that, which is how, people always say, like, there's no way I would write this. You're thinking with your human brain, with your soul brain, or you don't have a brain, actually, with your soul plan, you absolutely plan this with so much intention for amazing growth, and then, he's like, I hear it's going to be hard, Dad. And you're like, that's okay. I can handle it. Game on. Living the human experience. It's fucking terrible. Yeah. Walking through the loss of a child at any level of life is terrible, whether it's miscarriage, whether it, like, no parent in the human sense should ever lose a child, because that's our human nature. And human nature, it's just not natural to lose a child in the physical sense. But on a spiritual sense, the strongest spirits write the most difficult journeys. And those who write the hardest journeys are growing the most. And so you are absolutely amazing for writing that journey, and living it and carrying it and all of the weight. But how much unconditional love were you blessed with in the moment of your child's passing that you never even realized that you held? Not that you didn't realize that you loved your child unconditionally, but the unconditional compassion and love for every moment that you ever shared with your child is immense. And there's so much growth in that. It's beautiful.
Yes, which brings us back to, right. Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
Now back to our episode. Let me get the name of your book out there as we got into the book right away, but it's How Do I Live Life When My Child is in Heaven? How do I live life when my child is in heaven? From Shattered to Healing. So that's the name of Farah's new book. But I want to get back to that love thing because that is it, right? That's what we learn, that love is the overriding thing of everything that we learn about the spirit world. It's love embodied. And that is what we're supposed to be exemplifying on this earth. And the golden rule, which is part of every major religion and everything. So there's reasons why those things are there. Now, you don't know, but I was a pastor for 15 years. And now when I look at the Bible, I see all these things that qualify exactly what I know now about the spirit world and everything. And I believe that those men who wrote the Bible and everything, and no, I don't believe, well, God was certainly part of it because he inspired these men. But the things they were trying to describe are things that I've learned now through enlightenment of all of this stuff that all these different things like Paul's Damascus Road experience. It could have been a near-death experience, this type of thing, and all the things, the presence or the tenets of the Bible are well structured things. They're things that we should be doing on this earth for good things. I don't believe in the dogma of religion, which is the control factor that religions have taken on, but I do believe in the words that have come through a lot of the major religions and the texts that men were trying to describe these things that they were probably experiencing like we are. But there's been more enlightenment and understanding of this now that we can describe it better and understand it on a different level, especially with science and quantum physics and all these things that are qualifying some of this, right?
I say that with religion, you have to take what resonates within your heart or soul, and let that resonate within you, and then throw the things out the window that don't make sense to your heart or soul, right? Because there's little parts of each religion that I don't disagree, I don't agree with necessarily. I mean, I have a strong faith in God, but I don't belong to any one specific religion because there's little parts of each that I don't agree with. And the one thing that I realized about the Bible is, although it's an amazingly beautiful book and it is full of God's love, absolutely, but the positives in that book and the love in that book absolutely should exist. The negatives for me should not. The God that I know is all powerful and loving and amazing and unconditional and not condemning. And so I think that the ego of man was written into that book just a bit.
Yep.
And what better way to control than to lead by fear? And so I think that the fear factor really doesn't belong, because I mean, so here's the thing, like if in your soul plan dynamic, somebody signs up to be the villain and the terrible to grow you, well, what kind of shit deal would that be if they got sent to hell for all eternity for playing the role that they were meant to grow you the most?
Right.
And, so, I mean, like my ex who beat me and spit on me for 17 years and told me how worthless I was. There's a lot of people who have said, oh, there's a special place in hell for him. But the truth is, I'll high five him and embrace him in heaven someday. Not on earth, guys. I hope he steps in warm gum, because if that reflects on me, I'll buy some new shoes. But the truth is, I will high five him and say, thank you for living that hard karmic energy of being the alcoholic, of being the abuser, and doing all of those things, not only to grow me, but to grow our kids and to grow, a lot of people around him. Like, he's the gift that keeps on giving, but he's meant to be. So what kind of, welcome home to heaven for playing that hard role and living that terrible, hard life would that be if we get sent straight to hell? So
Yeah.
it just didn't make sense to me even younger. And then as I got more of a knowing, I understood, like, oh, those are just ego and, it written in there. And some of those things just don't resonate or exist within my space. So
yeah, you think of them trying to describe what they're describing, and then their humanness comes in this, like we do. We battle with both all the time, and so that humanness comes in, and those doubts and everything, like all the time, right? I've said it a gazillion times on here. If I wrote down everything that I can attribute to Jeff contacting me since he's passed, I would have a legal binder to take into court that my case is won, and so I have enough evidence. Wow. There's no doubt about it. And I am finally settled in that, where I'm like, I am not going to doubt this anymore. There's no more, because your humanness will always come in and say, but wait a minute, all this, and you fight with that.
Self-doubt is a huge thing.
Yeah, that's what those men did too, or the people who wrote those texts. They're going through that in themselves too, and they're just writing down everything because that's how they got things out those days. So the positive, negative were all coming through too. Yeah, oh, that's so real too. I finally, just one day recently, it hit me, and I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like, because I would talk to people, or I'd say it on, a snippet I'm doing online or whatever, and I'd always kind of qualify it for people, trying to help them feel more comfortable in it or whatever. Finally, I'm just like, you know what? This is it. And I believe this. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm going to stop apologizing for it,
Yeah, self-doubt is a huge thing. And when I wrote my third book, I wrote a teaching book for people to really start to pay attention and make their own connections, with their loved ones, because you have unbreakable bonds with your loved ones. And I remember my stepmom at the time said to me, she goes, "Why are you writing that book? Isn't it going to take away from your business?" And I said, you know what? If nobody in this world ever needed me again, it would be a beautiful day if they could realize their own connections. But in that book, I probably wrote at least 100 times, this is where you let go of your self-doubt. Okay, and here's where just when you thought you let go of your self-doubt, here's where you let go of it again. Mm-hmm. And when my girlfriend read the book before I published it, she goes, "Do you have any idea how many times you wrote let go of your self-doubt?" And I said, you know what? I could have written it 1,000 more times and it wouldn't be enough, because human nature is to have that self-doubt and that skepticism, and that, we go into that negative space, especially with grief, so when somebody's trying to work on a connection with their own child, especially such a sensitive subject, and wants to know that they can still hear, and are bound to their child, I have to remind them over and over, put your self-doubt down. Now pick up their love. And that's, You've got this. Look at you. I'm proud of you, man.
Thank you. I'm just walking my path. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah.
say things like that. And, I'm coming up on 2 years, and a lot of people are like, holy cow, 2 years. How are you like that? And it's like, I'm just walking my path. I have no idea what's going on with other people, and that's all I know. And that's all I can tend to. So, but I want to.
He brought you to the knowledge is what happened. Your son brought you to the knowledge that you needed to make it through. And I would say he worked overtime for that because he knew that you needed it.
He was so smart. He didn't graduate high school. He got a GED after, but he was
Same.
bored. He was bored with school. That's how he was so smart that he was like bored with school. And then when my mom passed, I started looking at near-death experiences, and we'd talk about these kind of things. And he talked to me about things like quantum physics, and he knew this stuff, even not graduating from high school. I mean, this is the kind of kid Jeff was. So I totally agree with you. I think that he understood this in a different way and everything. So I do accept that for sure. And it's amazing. It's an amazing experience. And the qualifications that come through, the confirmations that come through day in and day out are amazing. Today, this gentleman I'm taking to the airport, and he's just like, he's a truck driver who's getting a ride to the airport to fly back home. And we got talking about things, and he's like, man, how did I get you on this ride? Well, he's been thinking about this stuff, and he's been researching things or whatever and all this. And we got in depth about things. And he's like, I said, there's simply no coincidences. There are none. I don't believe in those.
He needed it.
Yeah.
He needed somebody that would introduce him to the information that he needed to at least start looking for what he needs in his heart. I mean, that's the thing. Once you have the knowing, it's hard to unknow again. And it doesn't make life easy, but it makes it a little easier to understand why.
Yeah. And that's why I talk about
things are happening.
Yeah. And I talk about confirmations. To me, every time that happens, it's just like another stamp. Yes, Tom, you're on the right path. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And Jeff's done that for me a couple different times. I've told the story recently again, too. And sorry for those who listen to every podcast because you hear the same stories a lot. But Jeff came through 2 different times to me personally while I was meditating, and once in a dream, once meditating. But he simply comes through and says, I'm here, Dad. Like a confirmation, like, yes, I am here. And you keep going the way you're going is pretty much what I get from it. It's a simple like acknowledgement, and Jeff didn't talk a whole lot. So it's simple. It's his personality, all this other thing. And he's just like, Dad, I'm here, and it's right.
You're doing good. He's cheering you on.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Yeah. So it's amazing. Why don't you take us through your books and what they're about, and kind of the progression through your books and things, if you could, just a little synopsis of each.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first book that I wrote and published is called Looking into the Windows of Heaven. And it really just is, the why we live a life, what happens after we live a life. There's a chapter in there about suicide, because suicide is one of those things that everybody has a struggle with, understanding, because it just stands out for us a lot more sometimes than some of the other types of passings. And I just wanted to put understanding, and it's short and sweet and to the point in Farah talk. And I don't do the oogie boogie conversation, so there's nothing for you to memorize. There's nothing for you to have to research, because when I write my books, I write them in a conversation to you. And then my second book is titled Heaven is Within Us, and it's really more of a continuation of that first one. People had asked me about other subjects, and I included those, so it's kind of a recap of the first one, and it's got reading stories in it, because some of my clients allowed me to put, examples of their readings and pictures of their loved ones in it. And then there's my third book, and it's titled Heaven's Voice is Within Your Soul. And that is the teaching book. And it's got a picture of my hands with butterflies flying. And I remember we were on like a Helping Parents Heal thing at one point, and somebody said, I just want to hear my child. how do I hear my child? And everybody was like, call Fara Gibson, psychic medium. She's great. She's great. And it actually broke my heart that the people were suggesting me, because I wanted this mom to know above all else that she can hear her child. And so it really inspired me to write that book, so that not everybody feels like they have to reach out to a medium and pay a bunch of money or do this or do that in order to hear their child. And it's the reminder of that unbreakable bond with your child or with your person, whether it's a parent or a spouse, or anybody. That's just a teaching book for you to develop your own abilities, really challenge yourself to kind of figure out what you do have. Like, there's even challenges in the book. They're kind of fun. I just really put that out so that people could start developing. And there's a lot of people who were like me that had abilities when they were young, but they didn't have a mentor or a teacher and didn't really necessarily want to take classes. So that book, again, is in Farah Talk. And when I say Farah Talk, it's just blunt like me, like I'm talking to you right now. But then this fourth one that I wrote, I did not intend to write a book at this point. I had just finished the Helping Parents Heal conference in August, and that I did see you there. And I was driving down the road in my car, and I never listen to the radio in my vehicle. That's my time to talk to heaven. It's me and heaven in my vehicle with no radio, and it's just my space. And I literally got a request from heaven and from the big guy. This was a request from God for me. And he said, I need you to write a book. And I'm actually just as normal with God as I am with you or anybody else. And I said, really, like, what the fuck do you want me to write? Like, do you want to put a poetry book out? Like, what is it that I'm, because I write a lot of poetry that's inspired by heaven. And I got the message back, no, I need you to write a book for the parents. And I literally said out loud, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Because that request was so profound. Writing a book for the parents, like, holy crap. And I was getting messages, like that there's no handbook for this, for parents who lose their children, and there's no guide to tell them, the things, and that life was getting to be so much harder that we needed to put more information out to help people have a perspective of heaven and what it is and what the purpose is for this whole life thing in general. And so I was running through my head, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to cover everything, like miscarriages, abortions, babies born sick, toddlers, passing, SIDS, all the things, like disability, kids born with disabilities, and that, being in that caregiver position as a parent, and kids with addiction, kids with tragedy passings. I was going to have to literally cover every aspect of conception to passing for every type of dynamic that can be lived. And then I needed to explain the why. And so what happens to my kid after they pass? And what happens when they go back to heaven and all of those things? Because then people are like, well, what is my kid doing? So I really wanted to take people from the soul planning and to give a better understanding, because I'm sure a lot of, especially parents new to this journey, hear that whole soul planning thing, and that's hard to understand. And you probably get 20 different versions, and you never know which version you can trust on the internet. Is it somebody who's truly gifted that's putting that version out, or is it somebody that's full of shit and and is guiding you in the wrong direction? So it's really hard to find that truth. And like I say, do your research, throw out what does not resonate with you, and hold the things that help. And so this book, it's just, like I said, beginning to end, it's Farah Talk. It's got a few cuss words in it, I'm sure, because I'm a little cussy. But,
No.
No, but, I think, and I shared a lot of life experience stuff in this book as well, to really kind of put into perspective, like, what did this mean for me? And do you see the beauty in it? Because I'm trying to teach you the beauty in every terrible. And so I had to walk through a lot of hard stuff growing up to get where I am today, to be able to understand and help people.
Yeah, that is quite a challenge. And I'm glad you addressed it, really, because a lot of the parents, obviously, they're going to be like, well, what qualifies her to write this book, right. Actually, I read the caption when you put the book out, and I skimmed it quick, and I was just occupied at the time, and I skimmed it, and I was like, oh, I didn't know Farah lost a child, I didn't, and then I reread it, and I was like, oh, she didn't lose a child. And
If
so,
I didn't know CPR, my little girl would not be here today.
mm,
And yeah, so my daughter had a near drowning when she was 2, and there were 8 adults out there, and I'm allergic to the sun, and I was not out there. And the whole story at length is in the book. But I ran out to screaming, not expecting to see my daughter deceased in their hands, and had to start CPR on her. And I was told even at the hospital after we got her there that she was not going to make it, and if she did, she was going to be brain dead for the rest of her life, and we wouldn't want her that way.
mm,
And and then just to skip ahead in that, she got a blessing. And so when I say I don't do religion, I don't do a specific religion, but I do have faith. And uh, somebody in my family asked if they could do a blessing, and like I said, the whole thing's in there. And my little girl, with their hands on her head and her body, opened her eyes in the middle of that blessing, and
mm,
I saw that my daughter's soul in that moment would have been deciding whether or not she was going to come back or stay where
mm,
she was, and she came back in that
mm.
moment, and and it was beautiful. So I but I say, the reason I share this is, you're probably wondering, like, why did you share this story? Because your child lived and mine didn't. But the truth is, my daughter's soul plan was first and foremost for her in that moment, and it was her choice whether or not she had reached her growth. It wouldn't have been up to me. And I do have her. In fact, she's coming over for dinner tonight. So
That's wonderful. And,
yeah,
I mean, but I will testify to this, that you have the heart for all of us. And so I will tell all the parents out there who would ever doubt that Farah would have any qualification to do this, that she absolutely
yeah,
does. And her heart has been steered to this. And
yeah,
your association with Helping Parents Heal and all of that is intense. And, I think you probably
yeah.
feel that, right? You were
I'm
directed that
so
way.
driven to help. I'm so driven to help. And Helping Parents Heal had such an amazing purpose. I mean, I actually dedicated this book to Helping Parents Heal because their organization was unlike anybody else's for me. And I've seen a lot of different grief organizations. And a lot of the grief organizations that I've seen are very doom and gloom. Like when somebody's having a shit day, and you're going to have a shit day in grief, and then everybody else jumps on their ship and helps sink them in some of those other groups. And when I saw Helping Parents Heal, the title in itself wasn't talking about, you know, loss or grief. It was talking about helping parents heal. And that's truly what I've seen from them. Like when a parent has a shit day, and you guys still do, you all have a shit day, and that's
That's right.
okay. But you've got multiple people going, what do you need from me today? Give me a call. I've got you. Oh, I totally get you and I understand you. But here's, maybe they hand you tools that have worked for them. And I just love that so much, that support group. You have found your people to carry you through that understand your footing, and you're not dragging each other down in that group. And I love that. And the dads do resonate with me a bit. Again, I was raised by a good old boy. I was my dad's hunting buddy and his bird dog. And, I was his tool passer, like he was a mechanic too, and I learned to dodge a wrench, if he was not throwing it at me, but just pissed at the moment, I'm like, oh, there it goes, and I grew up in such a no bullshit cloth because of that good old boy cloth. And then I still live in it now. My husband is a good old boy, and I love that about him. And so I've always had an understanding of how men work. My dad was a single father. And I have such a compassion for that. Men are not as emotional beings as us women can be. And then not only are you emotional within, but society says that men don't cry and blah blah blah, but when you have a child in heaven, when you have a loss like this, you need to have your own space. You need to have a space amongst other guys, where you can be emotional and you can talk about things, and you don't necessarily have to hold your wife up in that moment, because that's the role that a man plays, is that nurturing, protector and strength. And so I love that they have a dad's group. The dads have my heart. The fact that any dads are in that group at all, like, I'm so proud of, because it takes a lot of confidence in yourself to really be able to be a part of a group like this and say, you know what, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to believe that I have this connection with my child, and I'm going to pursue it. And I love that so much.
Part of that with the men too, is that our ability to share with each other there and open up and things like that has helped. Well, personally, I will speak for myself. It's helped me personally to be able to do that with Judy and things too. So that's, it's allowed me to have trust in that and to understand that. And we have a better communication level because of that. So That's really
Yeah, and
helped that.
otherwise before that, it could have been just a Tupperware party for her. You're like, oh, that's your thing. Okay, go ahead. But once you got into it, you're like, wow, this is not just a Tupperware party, and I want to be a part of it. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
will confess that initially I had the wrong impression of that. That yes, that was the place for it. It wasn't to be brought over, but when you do bring it over, when you do integrate it, that is the ultimate healing in that and everything. So I would encourage guys out there too to do that, of course, and I'll bring that up in the meeting tonight. As a matter of fact, that'll be a good one. So,
Yes.
yeah, so that's a learning lesson. Just learn that, just experience that, and it's been awesome. So. Awesome. Farah, what else you got going on? What's happening? What's the future look like?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm scheduled into June right now with readings back to back. I know that in April, I will be doing a Zoom gallery reading with Drew Pelifrone. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a medium. He was at the conference as well. So I can't remember the date of that. I want to say like it's a Saturday, the 19th of April.
Didn't you guys
And
do one together for us? You guys did one.
we did. We were in the medium scramble together. So
I was in yours. I was
did.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fun so I'm not big on working with another medium typically because, like I'm like, wait, how do we do that? Because I have my abilities and they have theirs, and how are we to? But he and I really worked well together. We were actually both connecting with the same loved one at the same time, and he had a very similar style to mine, which was nice to experience, because when you have two mediums with very different styles, it can be a very different presentation, than somebody
Yep.
who really kind of works like you. And he's high energy, he's a little mouthy like me, and we were both very specific in our validations that we give, and that's important to me, because how am I going to give you faith if I give you fluff? And so I'm not the one that's like, oh, they're fluttering at your side and they're kissing your cheek. Like, fuck that. Anybody can tell you that. And so I really challenged them to give specifics, and I noticed that Drew did too. So, but, I just know my style, and I'm really protective of it, because I see other people call themselves mediums and they give things that could be said by anybody. And it's really disheartening to me, because you're working with people in such a sensitive subject with grief. And if you're going to be able to do this, give yourself grace, of course, but at the same time, like, it needs to be specific, and it needs to be something that will really catch their heart and attention to deliver that healing completely. So yeah, just a different. Yeah.
Great words. Great words. Yeah. So that withdrew. That's going to be where are you doing that?
We're going to be doing it on Zoom. So I know that on Facebook, if anybody's on Facebook, I have a page, Fara Gibson Psychic Medium, and my first name is a 4-letter word because Dad didn't know how to spell, but he had a crush on Farrah Fawcett. So it's Fara. But if you look up Fara Gibson Psychic Medium, I know that I just shared the event on there. And Drew Pelifrone has his own website, and he's like got the event listed on there on his. So other than that, I don't have a lot of like big events planned. I know that I'll be at Unity for Helping Parents Heal this coming Sunday, but they're limiting the seating for that because they're worried about fire code and all those things. So I think that, but yeah, I don't have a lot of time to do large group events because I'm booked out with so many private until June, like I said. So I work 12-day stretches with 2 days off in between. That's
heavy work. And so if people want to get in touch with you for a reading, how do they do that?
So my website, it's faragibson.com. So again, faragibson.com. And you'll find all the information there for scheduling. And, and even if you never schedule a reading with me, and if you go over to my psychic page on Facebook, I mean, honestly, I share so much there. I share so many of my writings there, so that even if you never schedule, hopefully I can put something into perspective for you. And I do write a lot of heavenly inspired poetry, and it's not dumb. I promise you'll love it a muchness. And, when you find those things and people are like, oh my gosh, it's like you shared something that I totally needed today. I'm like, no, your loved one made sure you saw that today. Yeah. I've actually posted it before, so I mean, it's amazing how heaven works over time.
Yeah.
Heaven's working overtime for you every day.
Incredible. Yeah. We'll make sure all those things are in the show notes. I'll have links to all those things if people want to find them. So,
cool.
Anything else you want to share, Farah? Anything that's on your heart?
No, I just want to say that I'm so proud of you for how far you've come, because for you to move from a place of a grieving dad to creating a platform to help people in their grief, you're amazing. So I'm extremely proud of you. It takes a strong person to do what you're doing, and keep going, because you're touching hearts. Even if you touch one a day, I always say, like, my goal is to heal this world one person at a time. If I can reach one person with heaven's love, then I'm doing a good job, and you're doing that too. So keep doing what you do.
I truly appreciate that, and I've said so many times I was guided to do this. I know I was, and so my release of this total podcast, everything, and things are starting to happen now, and it doesn't surprise me that I'm getting more attention in places, and the guests that are coming on, different level and things. So it doesn't surprise me, though, because I know that if you're supposed to be doing what you're doing, then it's going to succeed in the way it's supposed to succeed. So that's exactly the way I look at it.
I went from the phone company. I was working at the phone company doing readings at my lunch break, doing readings after work, and I was not advertising anything. And I have never advertised anything to this day. And I am doing readings for people all over the world now. People in Germany and Russia and Dubai and Australia and Ireland and all these amazing places, because heaven's paving the way. And when you're meant to help others, heaven will absolutely, pave your way. And so if you're seeing your way paved, people are like, what are you doing next? I'm like, fuck, I don't know. I'll just see what happens. Like,
yeah,
I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
So,
but as those things happen, it's like, yes, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Right. And it's
amazing.
But I thank you for those words. It's always great to get the human encouragement. We need that for sure. So thank you.
Yeah.
Farah, thanks so much for taking the time to come on today. You rushed into this, got it for me quick, and I appreciate it.
Oh, that's okay.
And people are going to love what you have to say. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.